So coil pots, what you are doing is you are starting from the bottom and you're working your way up to the top, okay? So that's why your plan for coil is very important, because you need to know where you're starting and the size it's going to be so that you can work your way up, okay? First things first, I'm going to explain this. Some people have noticed, which we fixed it, but there have been like dry chunks of clay in the bag. You do not, if your clay is so hard you can't squeeze it, you do not have to use that clay. If you have dry clay, always like check with me first just to be like, hey, is this too dry to work with? I'll say yes. And I do now have a recycle bucket that's under the wedging table. And so in that recycle bucket, I actually just ask though that you rip up the clay into small pieces because it does dry better. And then we recycle that clay. But obviously I want to try to limit the amount of recycling we have to do. So any clay that you think is too dry, just talk to me first and I'll tell you. Sound good? So I noticed that earlier. Some of my first period people were really struggling and I'm like, you guys don't have to use that. It's okay. All right. So I'm going to demonstrate two things, how to make your base and then how to make a straight coil and how to make an angled coil. So this pot right here, I made this first period. I wanted to dry it a little bit so I could show you how to smooth it. But you can see here I added, it's kind of sloped out and then goes back in. So I'm going to explain that a little bit today too, okay? So first things first, I have my clay and I wedged it properly. Remember that when you're wedging your clay, you're adding your body pressure on it, lifting it up and getting rid of all those air bubbles, okay? And so I'm going to cut off or just rip off a piece for my base, all right? And look, I didn't wedge it very well because there's a big hole in the middle. So always make sure you wedge that clay. I'm not going to keep this pot, it's just for the demo, but... All right, first things first, we're gonna make your base, okay? So I'm gonna make a lot of food references, okay? So the first thing you're gonna do is just kind of squeeze it in your hands. You're gonna make it into a hamburger patty or veggie patty if that's your thing, okay? But you want it to be kind of flat. Now what you're gonna do is I want you to stretch out your base. And so we do have, and we'll do this in the next project as well, we'll roll out slabs. But for coil pots, you want your base to be really compressed. And so to do that, stretching it out is a really good way to do that. How to stretch out your base, and I'll answer your question in just a minute, okay? To stretch out your base, you pull the clay back toward you. So you take your clay and you're gonna pull it like this, okay? And it does sound kind of loud at first, but this is the noise it should sound like, okay? If it sounds like this, you're doing it too loud, okay? You want to pull it toward you and stretch it into a pancake. It's kind of like if you're making your bed, you fluff your sheets. It's kind of that same motion. I really hope that you guys have made your bed before, okay? Did you have a question on it?
If it's too dry though, do we like smash it?
Well, no, we just recycle it. So we make it, recycling is a long process. We just dry it out, submerge it in water, and then we let it dry out again. So. But I take care of all that for you because it's not a very fun job. So I got you.
Yeah, because it can break.
Yes. Yeah. We'll get it. We'll take care of it. So now I have a pancake. This is what you want, okay? So the pancake is where you'll start your base. Now it seems thin, but once you cut out the middle, it's actually thicker than it looks. And what you're going to do is we actually have in the sink over here, we have a bunch of just random containers under the sink. And you guys can kind of pick, depending on like how thin you want to start. It kind of depends on the shape of the coil pot you're going for, but you can kind of pick the container that you want the size to be for your base. So I'm just going to pick this beautiful cottage cheese container, and I'm going to flip it over. Remember that clay will shrink, so it's always good to make it a little bit bigger than you need it. I'm going to flip the container over, and sorry, hopefully you guys, and if you guys in the back can't see, you can always stand up and look too, but I'm just going to trace around the container. You don't want to cut through, and please don't use the container like as a cookie cutter. It's because if you just push the container through the clay, it makes it a little difficult to clean. And then sometimes your clay gets stuck in there too. So all I did was I just traced a circle. And it is really important that you take your time on the base because you want it to be, this is the foundation for your coil pot. And then when you're cutting, I like to take a fettling knife and hold it like at the end of the blade. It just makes it a little bit more sturdy. And I cut around and just take your time. This is for the sake of the demo, so I'm not gonna take too much time. But you're gonna really be patient and cut out that circle. You want the base of your coiled pot to be as circular as possible because, bless you, because every coil that you add on top of that, you want to be circular. So this is exactly how thick you want your base to be. So the thickness of your pinky, or what's the measurement? Pinky or
1/4.
1/4, quarter inch. Okay, that's a good thickness for clay. So I'm going to start with my base, and now I'm going to roll my first coil. Okay, oh, that's the dry clay there. So when you roll a coil, so I'm going to set my base aside. You can roll a coil 2 different ways. You can roll a coil that goes straight up and down vertical. Okay, and I've lost some people in the back. You can roll a coil that's straight up and down vertical, or you can roll a coil that's angled, that goes in or out, okay? So I'm just gonna roll one big coil and cut it in half so I can show you both. And you're gonna squeeze the clay into, well, like a turd shape. It's gonna look like a turd, okay? Like that's what it looks like. So you wanna squeeze it into a nice turd shape, okay? And then you wanna pinch the ends of your turd because you don't wanna roll air into the coil. Sometimes that happens, so if you just pinch the end a little bit, sometimes you'll get like a little cinnamon roll effect that happens on the end, and it gets air in your coil, okay? So you wanna start like this. When you roll your coil, as to the best of your ability, stand up to do the coil because it just helps you roll. And you're gonna roll from the back of your hand all the way to your fingertips. I see people all the time that sit at their table and they just roll like this. Like you can't get a lot of pressure on it. You wanna make sure that your body weight's on it. And you're gonna roll with one hand, okay? If you roll with one hand, then you won't get any pinch points because if you're rolling with 2 hands, it'll start to rotate in the middle and you'll get a little pinch point in the middle. So you just want to roll with one hand from one side to the other. And then you might hear like the clay might start to go clunk, 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 clunk like that. If that does that, you just lift it up, bat it down because your hand is not a perfect curve. So that's why that happens. So you're going to keep rolling. Okay. We'll keep rolling it out. And it's going to get pretty long. You want it to be just a little bit thicker than your thumb. And remember that we're specifically using coil to build a wall. So you're not gonna, it doesn't really matter that it's round. Like this is what you want it to look like. And now, like I said, I'm gonna cut it into 2 pieces. I'm gonna do one straight coil and one angled, okay? So for the first one, I'm gonna take my first coil. I'm gonna keep it straight. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flatten that coil. So using the bottom of my hand, I'm gonna flatten, and then I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna flatten the other side, okay? And now, when I stand it up, then it becomes that wall that I'm looking for. You want it to be just like the base. You want it to be the thickness of your pinky, and you're gonna stand it. You don't want these coils to be too thick, but you also don't want them to be too thin because then the pot will collapse on you, okay? So this is about the thickness that you're looking for. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my base, and I'm gonna stand that first coil up on top of my base, okay? You want your first coil to be on top because that holds the weight on top of the base. If you put it around, sometimes you'll get a little crack all the way around. So you want the weight to be held on top. Now, kind of like when we did the foot, you overlap your coils together and you're gonna cut right through the middle. Okay, remember the fettling knife's sharp, so I'm not gonna do this in the air. I'm gonna cut through both pieces at the same time. And then you'll remove the extra 2 pieces and your coil will fit perfectly together just like that at the seam, okay? So that's a straight coil up and down. Now, to make an angled coil, so I already pre-rolled this. To make an angled coil, you're gonna flatten it, but instead of keeping it straight, you're gonna bend it like a horseshoe, okay? So you're gonna bend it like this, and then you're gonna flatten it just like you did with your straight coil, okay? You can cut that up if you want to. You can cut it up if you want to. So I'm gonna flatten it out, and then what you're gonna have, again, I'm gonna flip it over. So you want it to be pinky thickness, but then what happens, so now it's flat, but when I lift it up, it goes out at an angle. So it either goes like this, or if I flip it over, it will go out, so either out or in, okay? And so you can decide, so when I take my coil, I'm gonna overlap them in the middle just like I did with the other one, and I'm gonna cut through both at the same time. All right, can I use that fettling knife now? Okay, so I'm gonna cut through both pieces at the same time again, and then I'll hold it up and show for the people in the back. Okay, so now that coil lines up, so you can see how now I'm getting a shape to it, okay? The biggest thing, when you start slipping and scoring these together, you don't want them to connect at the same point. You wanna rotate it around to keep it more structurally stable, okay? So like if you ever look at a brick wall, when they stack bricks, they always alternate where they connect in the middle. That makes it stronger, so that's what you're gonna do. When you slip and score, you're gonna take this tool, which is called a Yes, tooth rib. I was hoping somebody would say it. And you're going to score the base. So you're going to go around and score. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention too is with your base, you always want to take a rubber rib and compress your base on both sides just to make it stronger. That's one thing that I did not mention. So make sure you do that. Then you're going to slip and score. As always, every time you attach clay to clay, you want to score every surface that you're going to attach. And then you're going to take slip. You're going to dab slip on those score marks. You're going to compress them together. Okay? And you're going to do the same thing with your angled coil. You're going to slip and score. You're going to attach those together. Now, here's the hard part about coil is you guys are only working in this room like 40 minutes every day, right? So letting these dry is the biggest challenge because you can't build the whole thing in one day. It'll fall and collapse. So you got to build it layer by layer. My suggestion is like 1 or 2 coils per period. Let it dry with some air in the bag and then smooth it out. So this piece right here, I made this during first period today. And it's been sitting out all day, and it's getting to the point where it's not quite leather hard, but it's harder. And how to smooth that is you take your smoothing tool and you actually dig into the clay and you go both directions. So you go this way and then you go back the other direction. And you want to go through and you want to try your best to blend those seams together so that you can't even tell that it was multiple pieces put together. Okay? Once you smooth them, then you can take your rubber rib. You want your rubber rib to be clean, and you kind of bend it like this and go back over and blend it even more. And the goal, again, is that you can't even tell that it was coils put together. The goal is to make it look like it was all one piece. And even you guys who are far in the back, I'm not completely done smoothing this yet, but you can tell the difference between this, and if I turn it around, you can clearly tell the difference, right? It's a lot more smooth. One more tip for you. One of my friends in college taught me this. He called it a facelift. If you're having a really rough area of your pot, take a tooth rib, rough up the texture really good, and then bring your rubber rib back over, because basically what you do is you lift that clay up and then you reset it down, and it makes it a lot more smooth. So that's kind of a hot tip for when you're smoothing. But again, take your time, do a couple layers every day, and then smooth it out after that. Cool? I think that about covers everything. Are there any questions about any of that with coil?